Hey, it's finally Foundation Friday. If you're new here on Fridays, I sit down and talk about a new or old, we don't discriminate here, foundation that I've been trying out. I do multi-day wear tests using a variety of tools, techniques, products, whatever. So if you're interested in learning more about the new Nars Soft Matte Complete Foundation, then please keep on watching. Before I get into the foundation review, I'm just going to give you a very brief background on the brand Nars. Makeup artist, photographer, iconoclast, creative visionary Francois Nars launched Nars Cosmetics with 12 cult favorite lipsticks in 1994, inspiring self-expression, creativity, and artistry with uncompromising pigment purity and imaginative color. Play and try to be a little bit daring. Break the rules. The new Nars Soft Matte Complete Foundation retails for $40 and you get 1.5 fluid ounces, which is considerably more than a standard foundation. There are 34 shades in this range that go from fair to very deep. The shade names seem to correspond with the other Nars foundations, so I assume that you should be able to buy the same shade across any of the foundations. This is my first Nars foundation. I picked up the shade Yukon L2.5, which is for light skin with pink undertones. The shade is okay, but I'm interested in doing additional matching since this does oxidize slightly. I'm going to insert some swatches here of Yukon compared to some other foundations that I have in my collection. Nars Soft Matte Complete Foundation in the shade Yukon L2.5, Nars Radiant Creamy Concealer in the shade Vanilla, Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Foundation in the shade Too Cool, my closest shade match, Rare Beauty Foundation in the shade 160C, and the Pat McGrath foundation in the shade L6. I'm going to pop on the screen the full description, but I'm really just going to go over some of the claims and more interesting bits. Discover comfortable 16-hour wear, oxidation resistant, transfer resistant, sweat proof, keeps skin hydrated, and help protect skin from pollution and blue light damage. Unique oil absorbing powders create a smooth second skin finish. The claims of this foundation are that it's a medium to full buildable coverage, natural soft matte finish, 16-hour wear, oil-free, oxidation-resistant, shine-proof, transfer-proof, humidity-proof, sweat-proof, and protects from pollution and blue light. It goes on to recommend that you pat, press, blend. Dispense a small amount on the back of your hand. One drop delivers full coverage with fingertip application. Pat product with fingertips, start at the center of the face and gently press the foundation on skin using a stippling motion to blend outward. Work in small sections, focusing on one area at a time. Moving on to packaging. The outer packaging is a soft rubber and it is very clearly part of the Nars product line. The foundation itself comes in a clear plastic bottle with a screw top that does close quite securely. It also has a squeeze tip, which I'm sure by now you know is not my preference. And as with the outer packaging, this bottle is very distinctly part of the Nars product lineup. I am a bit surprised they went with a squeeze tube packaging since the formula is on the thinner side, and since the tip is stored down, it does leak into the cap, and with leaking comes those hard and crusty bits that are getting into the grooves as well as collecting around the squeeze tip. It's so lightweight, creamy, and smooth that I would almost go as far to say that it's silky. It's very quick drying and sets down almost immediately. There's almost no wiggle room to adjust if necessary. You have to work in small sections and use less product than you think you need. I really like how all methods of application turned out, though my favorite way was using my fingers. I do think that the warmth and oils from my fingers helped extend the workability of the foundation and really helped to work it into my skin. My second preferred way of applying this foundation is by using a sponge. I do feel like it helped aid in moving the foundation around before it set in. I also think it helped the foundation stay true to the skin-like texture and finish. I didn't notice a lot of product being soaked up into the sponge, which is a blessing and a curse, so to speak. It's a blessing because you don't lose a lot of product, but it's a curse because if you over apply, you can't soak up the excess foundation. Third, and only because there has to be a third place, is using a brush. Using the brush applied at a much higher full coverage level than using my fingers or a sponge did, it looked much more similar to how a full coverage foundation typically looks, but I do really like the overall finish that I was able to achieve with this technique. So if you're someone that likes applying their foundation using a brush, I don't think that you'll be disappointed with how your foundation turns out. Also, I don't notice a heavy scent when I use the foundation. And now that that's out of the way, let's get into my final thoughts. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, this is my first Nars foundation. I know that their foundations tend to be very polarizing. You either really love them or you really don't love them. I was pretty neutral going into this. I hadn't seen any YouTube reviews, and I'd seen a few positive things across Reddit forums that kind of piqued my interest in checking this out. I am pleasantly surprised at how the foundation performed. I wasn't expecting it to be bad, but I definitely wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I do. My first impression was so positive that I immediately knew that this would displace my current favorite foundation, which is the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Foundation. My second impression was also positive, but it was less positive by the end of the night. For one of the wear test days, I did a side-by-side comparison between the Nars Soft Matte Complete Foundation and the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Foundation, and they were practically identical. I do still think that the Airbrush Flawless Foundation is a better shade match, but other than that, I feel like the Soft Matte Complete Foundation edged it out in every other way. The Nars foundation looks better on application, whereas the Airbrush Flawless Foundation takes a little bit of time to sink into your skin. While they wore incredibly similar, I did notice a pretty big difference between how they wore on my under eyes. The Nars foundation didn't emphasize any texture or fine lines and wrinkles that I have on my under eyes, where the Airbrush Flawless foundation looked really textured and heavy and showed every line. Moving on to claim accuracy. On the Sephora website, it says that it's a full coverage foundation, and on the Nars website, it says it's a medium to full coverage buildable foundation. Every way that I applied this foundation was some form of full coverage. I don't think that unless you cut it with something that you can get this to apply medium. As for being buildable, I think it's debatable because of how quickly it sets down. You can build it if you don't mind having a heavy or cakier looking kind of application, but if you want to maintain that skin-like finish, it's not easily built up. Natural soft matte finish. Yes, I absolutely agree. It's a natural soft matte finish. 16-hour wear. Of all of my wear test days, I was only able to get to 13 hours at most, but I did a couple of 12-hour days. On my 13-hour wear test day, I did notice that there was rubbing off on my chin and on my nose. And on some of the 12-hour days, there was some considerable wear off. So I do think your wear time is going to vary depending on what your activities are, if you're putting a mask on and off, and what products you're using alongside this foundation. But I think that it is definitely doable to get up to a 16-hour wear time. Oil-free. Well, I can't argue with that. Oxidation resistant, I don't super agree with that. I do think that it oxidized slightly when I first applied it, but it didn't oxidize at all during the day. Shine proof, I don't typically get oily or shiny, but I did notice on some of my days that my forehead was starting to look a little bit shiny, which is interesting for my skin type. Transfer proof, humidity proof, and sweat proof, I'm just going to kind of lump all in one. I don't think that it is necessarily transfer proof. On Sephora, it says transfer resistant. I do think that it's more transfer resistant. It depends on what products you're using. It depends on if you're taking a mask on and off. It depends on if you're a face toucher. I think that your experience with this particular point is going to vary with whether or not it's transfer proof or transfer resistant. Humidity isn't a thing that I'm really dealing with right now, so I can't attest to whether or not it's humidity proof. And as for sweat proof, I think that's debatable because I did wear this a few times through sweating, and I did notice some foundation running and smearing that I did need to touch up with a sponge. I also noticed on one day in particular that it was not cry proof, and I definitely had streaking that I could not adjust even using a sponge. I needed to reapply foundation on top of it. Protects from pollution and blue light. I'm not sure how to verify that, but I also can't disprove it, so maybe. Immediately, I was reminded of the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Foundation when I first started doing my wear tests of the Nars Soft Matte Complete Foundation. But I also think that this is very similar to the Pat McGrath Foundation. It does pretty much everything the Pat McGrath Foundation does, but amped up at a full coverage level. Typically my skin is normal leaning dry, but as the weather's changing, I've noticed my skin is a lot drier than usual. Based on my experience, if you have dry skin and a good hydrating skincare routine and you're looking for a soft matte foundation, then I definitely think you can make this work for you if you're willing to put some effort into it. Beyond that, I don't think that anyone with dry skin, dehydrated skin, flaky skin would find much benefit or enjoyment in using this foundation. I do think that people with normal skin or oily skin would really like this foundation. Overall, I am going to continue playing around with this foundation. The good days were really good. The bad days were not so good, but I'm sure that once I can find the sweet spot for making this work, it's going to be a definite repurchase. But I may try to find a better shade match. I hope you liked this review. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up. If you have any other foundations you'd like me to check out or any other videos you'd like to see from me, definitely let me know down below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I will catch you again soon in my next video.
Hi, Friday.